Turn the lights back on. Wow. Retro electro tech. When real audio ruled the world.
Greetings once again, ladies and gentlemen. This is Retro Ernest of Retro Electro Tech, and on the bench once again is the circuit board from the Realistic Concertmate MG-1 by Moog, which was a synthesizer produced for the Tandy Corporation, in other words Radio Shack. And this video is really not about the unit, it's more about the process that I'm involved in at the moment, although I'm almost completed. But anyways, removing this degraded foam from the surfaces of the VRs or sliders and switches, okay? And I had to set this aside for a while because once again I am swamped with work, and so I'm jumping back and forth, and nothing new there. Anyways, what I wanted to do is explain how I go about removing the degraded foam, which in part becomes sort of flaky and even a little powdery, but then again the other part, you know, it kind of gets really gooey, almost like a black tar, okay? So there's two aspects to it, and both of which you got to be careful when you're cleaning all of that garbage off of these VRs and switches. You don't want to drive any of that stuff down into the openings here on these VRs or even into these switches. And not that it would be the end of the world, and I'll talk about that more in just a moment. But anyways, for some of you younger cats, maybe newer cats, less experienced cats that haven't encountered all this foam goo and all that garbage, that's why I decided to make this video. I should have actually started rolling the camera when there was more foam on these. I already have most of this, a matter of fact, on this entire board, I have most of this foam removed, except for the last of the last, and what I'm talking about there is like all of this stuff that's stuck on the actual surface here, and you know, all of this over here. Let me go ahead and move the camera over. Like you see a lot of this sticky stuff that's still adhered to the surface. That's all going to have to be removed with a solvent and swabs and all that, but I'll get into that in just a moment. Let me kind of move it back on over here. Anyways, when I go about cleaning these, what I like to do is I like to bring these shafts forward toward me, and I use an X-Acto knife and one of these scraper blades, and it's all in the angle of the dangle. And the reason I don't like the shaft back here is because I like to get at kind of a lower angle with the tool, and this shaft just gets in the way when it's back here. But when I slide it forward, I can, you know, I have the whole entire surface of the VR here that I could work with. And what you don't want to do is start going all willy-nilly and scraping and again, dropping stuff down the hatch here, whether the looser, flakier stuff or the actual gooey stuff. You don't want to drop that down in there, and I'll get into that a little bit more. But you want to angle your tool here and slide it at an angle along, you know, each half of the VR, okay? You don't want to do this because when you're scraping, and actually let me just do this side first. When you're scraping along here at the correct angle, you're driving that residue, all of that foam, overboard, off the side and overboard rather than down into the hatch, okay? Same thing with this side. Get the correct angle and just slide along, pushing it overboard. If you were to do this, like I said a moment ago, although, you know, even if you were at the correct angle, you would be driving the residue from this half overboard, but the garbage on this half, you'd be driving down into the hatch. So one half at a time at the appropriate angle. Then when you get to the end over here, you can move your shaft on back and get the rest off. Excuse me. So, you know, that's you know, pretty obvious to a lot of people, but for those that have never encountered this, it might just be one of those things where you're just kind of trying to find your groove, the most efficient way to go about doing this type of a cleaning when you have to deal with all this horrible foam that's stuck all over the place. And again, I'm not saying that this is the best way. This is the way that I go about it, and everybody might have a technique that works best for them, but it's a good way not to drive any residue down into the openings here. And so it's all about using your tool in a manner that's kind of efficient, and just using the right angles again. And yeah, so it's not rocket science, and not a big deal. Obvious to some, not so obvious to others. So that's that. Not a big deal. I'm sure most of you can figure out the rest from there. And sometimes, even despite your best efforts, I just want to mention that even when you're at the appropriate angle and you're sliding on down, you'll get a little wild and woolly piece of residue that will still drop down in the shaft. Not the end of the world, or into the opening. Not a big deal. You have some fine point tweezers on hand. Just you can reach down in there and get that out of there. And as I've mentioned before, I'm going to perform a multi-step cleaning process, flushing these VRs and switches out with some contact cleaner, and really some aggressive flushing, getting all kinds of residual out. And then after things drain out and dry out, I'll apply the appropriate lubricant and get these VRs in a tip-top shape. So that's just a tip that I wanted to kind of share that might be useful to some that are trying to find their groove in regard to this. And another thing I want to mention is that whatever's left over, like for example, once again over here, you can use a swab and some, in this case I'll use like a naphtha, in other words lighter fluid, and put a few drops or so on the tip. You just don't want to start dripping all kinds of stuff down in there. And just scrub along here. Naphtha is a good solvent in that it will help to kind of dissolve and sort of loosen up, soften up all of that goo, and make it a lot easier to clean off of the surfaces, okay? And with me at least, where that comes from as far as using, and I'm going to pan this up, as far as using naphtha is my days servicing SLR cameras such as this, because these SLR cameras have light sills that are pressed down into these channels here, okay? And for the purpose of, well, keeping out light. In the days of film cameras and all that, this is the film compartment. You didn't want light leaks getting into this compartment and fogging up or damaging the film and all that. So these foam light sills that were pressed in these channels and sometimes in the door channels here, same type of foam basically, and it would really get all nasty in there and gummed up. And this is actually probably a good candidate for me to just run this. Yeah, see, I don't know if you can see that or not, but there's all this degraded foam in this one. I haven't restored this camera yet, but this video is not about cameras. But the point I'm driving home is that naphtha is something that's been used even in the camera servicing industry, if you will, when replacing light sills and getting rid of the old stuff, cleaning it out and all that, and then installing new light sills, new foam and all that. It was a common solvent, and probably still is for people that still work on these, to go in there and, in this case, apply some drops of naphtha, let it kind of soak in, scrape out all the old light sill goo and foam goo and all that stuff. So that's the point. So there you go. Naphtha. It's a good solvent to use to dissolve all that nasty foam goo and all that. So other than that, that's about it. I just wanted to share this with you, and for those of you that have to contend with this kind of stuff, these might be some tips that point you in the right direction. Otherwise, as I always say, peace, love, rock and roll, and of course, vintage audio.
This is a poor man's shoe production.